Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at a 9mm pistol, a weapon you get introduced to it just in the first couple seconds of the game when you get shot in the head with one. So the 9mm pistol is probably going to be one of the very first guns that you find. You can actually start out with this if you decide to tag guns. At the very start at Doc Mitchell's house, he'll give you a 9mm, and 9mm are super common throughout the Wasteland, especially in the early game. This is modeled off of a Browning high-powered pistol, which is a really cool addition to the game. I'm glad that they used this gun. Also, somewhat little side tangent. The high-powered is actually a pretty modern pistol for when it was made, since this is actually a 13-round magazine, semi-automatic pistol with pretty good sights, and this was made in the mid-1930s, which is more advanced than most other handguns at the time, so that's pretty cool. For the base stats of the 9mm pistol, this one requires 0 guns to wield and only 2 strength, so basically any character is going to be able to wield this. This is an early game weapon, so that's pretty common for most people to be able to wield this. This does 16 damage per shot, which isn't the highest, but it's still okay. This does 50 damage per second. You can spam the 9mm pretty fast, so damage per second is good. This has 16 crit damage on it, same as regular damage, a 1x crit modifier, which is normal. Only costs 17 action points to use in VATS. It's actually one of the better early game VATS weapons if you're going with a VATS build. This one weighs 1.5 weight, so very lightweight, and this one has 150 item health, which is pretty high for an early game handgun. That's not bad, especially with how common these are. A 9mm can be really useful on just about any character, just so that you have some sort of ranged option, because you're likely going to find a whole lot of bullets early on, and you're likely going to find a whole lot of 9mm to fix this up with, so you won't need weapon repair kits, and you don't have to worry about getting up to jury rigging to upgrade your pistol or to manage it better. Vendors also tend to sell this a lot. Oh, I also forgot to mention, the spread is 0.7, so it's one of the least accurate handguns in the game, but not too bad by handgun standards. And it holds 13 rounds in it. This can be increased with one of the mods, which we'll talk about in a second. For the pros of the 9mm, this one is a really good early game weapon. It's really nice to spam at just about anything. Ammo is super common with this too, so it's not difficult to find ammo whatsoever. It has pretty good damage per second, and the AP cost is really good, so even if you're not that great with guns in general in these type of games, the VAT system can really carry you in the early game, which is really nice to see. For the general cons of this though, it does have low damage per shot, so it's not really that great against armored enemies, and that's really its only major con to it. I guess it not being super accurate either, but you're probably not going to be using handguns at very long range a lot of the time, so that doesn't matter too much. And I guess armored enemies can kind of be an issue too, just with 9mm in general, because you don't have a great way of punching through armor. You do have the plus P rounds, which give you a little bit of armor piercing, but that's your only amount of armor piercing that you do have. Speaking of ammos, the 9mm has 4 different ammos that you can load into it. It has the standard 9mm, which gives you standard damage just across the board. Nothing really crazy there. You have the plus P rounds. These ones make it so you do more damage per shot with your 9mm, and you have armor breaking, but it does break your gun faster than it otherwise would. This one's pretty good to load into the 9mm too. You do have to buy these sadly, so you can't make them, but they can be useful when you can buy them. There is also the hollow point rounds. Hollow point rounds get you more damage per shot, but they give the enemy 3 times the amount of armor, or 3 times the amount of damage threshold, so that they can just tank through this, so it's really not good against armored enemies. Pretty good against non-armored or light armored enemies though. You can actually rack up a lot of DPS with this. And then if you have the hand loader perk, you can also load in the jacketed hollow point rounds, which give you 65% more damage, so 10% less than the regular hollow point rounds, but they only give the enemies 2 times the armor, so they're much better against light armored enemies. They're still not going to be weight great against heavily armored enemies, but I generally consider them an upgrade over the standard hollow point rounds most of the time. For a rating on my tier list, I would put the 9mm pistol into the C tier. I think it's perfectly fine early on, and it still actually is pretty good even to the later game if you want to carry around a 9mm. Because you can at least use it to pick off small things, and 9mm rounds are pretty common all throughout the game, whether it be that vendors sell a bunch of them, or you can just find enemies that have them. Like in the early game, tons of the convicts have them, so by the time you're getting to Prim, you're probably going to have to be fully stocked up on like 9mm rounds, which is pretty awesome, and 9mm pistols for that matter. Let's talk about the modded version of the 9mm, where you can put 2 mods on the 9mm handgun. And these ones do change it at least a decent amount. You can put an extended magazine, so you go from holding 13 rounds, which is already pretty good, up to 20 rounds, which is really nice to have. You can spam this quite a bit. And you can also put a short-range scope on this. The scope is kind of nice. It's better sights than the regular 9mm sights, so it's a little bit better at long to medium-ish range. But it's still not way accurate, so it's not going to be amazing at super long range. You don't really want to be using this as like an improvised sniping pistol. If you want to do that, the hunting revolver is a whole lot of a better option, or the 44 Magnum with the scope on it's a lot better option than the 9mm, but it's still okay. The big one is more the magazine, because holding 20 rounds makes it so you don't have to reload this very often, which is great. And when you're spam firing this at small enemies, you likely don't really care where a lot of your shots are going because 9mm rounds are so common. So I really like the extended magazine, and I think just these two added on to the 9mm would actually push it up the ranking a little bit, up into B tier. It's probably on the very low end of B tier for a pistol, but it's at least a decent upgrade to the handgun, so I really like that. There is also a unique version of the 9mm, which is the one that you get shot in the head with at the very start. This one is called Maria, and this one Benny has. So you have to take it off of Benny. There's actually even an achievement for killing Benny with his own pistol. So if you can shoot this out of his hand or something, I like to do it with the Silent 22, then pick it up and then shoot him with it, then you can actually get an achievement for killing him with his own pistol. Maria requires 0 guns and 2 strength, just the same as the regular 9mm. This one does 20 damage per shot, which is pretty good. 75 damage per second, its damage per second is actually really good. 20 crit damage, same as its regular damage. Has a 2x crit modifier though, so you're more likely to hit crits with this weapon. Only costs 15 action points to use. It's one of the best VATS weapons actually. If you want to be using Maria, especially against like non-armored enemies, it can be really nice. This one also weighs 1.5 weight, has 200 item health, has much less spread than the regular 9mm. This one's only 0.2 rather than a 0.6, so this one's one of the most accurate handguns, funny enough. And this one is stuck at the 13 rounds. You can't have the extended mag onto this unless you want to mod the game, in which case then you can. But 13 rounds is still plenty enough with this gun. This gun's actually quite a bit better. It's arguably one of the best handguns in the game, just kind of for doing handgun type stuff. It's not going to be an amazing weapon at everything, because long range it's not great, and against armored enemies it's not going to be way great either. But against anything else, it's going to be a very solid option. And I'd actually put Maria all the way up into the A tier. I think it's a really good gun overall. We should also go over some perks that help out with the 9mm too, aside from just all of the regular like crit perks and standard damage perks, which will help just about any weapon. The 9mm pistol is affected by the grunt perk, which gets you 25% more damage, and that actually makes the 9mm pretty relevant, and that's why I'd put these as high as I do, because the grunt perk does help them a lot. You get 25% more damage with Maria. That means you're going to have even more damage per second. You load this thing with like the jacketed hollow points, and you're just set to go most of the time. You can also take something like the Professional as a perk too, which gets you more crit damage with one-handed weapons, and these both count as one-handed weapons, so that can also help quite a bit. It makes Maria even more consistent. So in conclusion, would I recommend the 9mm pistol? Yeah, absolutely. In the early game, it's probably going to be your go-to weapon, assuming you're using a guns build. If you're using melee, unarmed, or really anything else, maybe it won't, but even then, it still isn't a bad thing to carry around just so that you have something that has bullets, that has range. The 9mm pistol can still serve you really well. And into the later game, the modded version or Maria can still be really good as a backup handgun. Maybe it won't be your go-to weapon, but it's still not bad for just using in enclosed areas, especially against non-armored enemies. Just load it with like hollow points and you're good to go. Tell me your thoughts on the 9mm pistol and Maria down in the comments below. This one was requested a lot too. A lot of people really wanted to see a video on Maria because it is one of the coolest looking handguns and just one of the coolest handguns in New Vegas. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye everybody.